The spring fair in Willowbrook had always been the kind of thing people remembered in pieces. Cotton candy on sticky fingers, paper lanterns swaying above the crowd, the carousel music turning softly like an old memory. That morning, the sky had been a pure, gentle blue. The air smelled of damp earth and blooming magnolias, and no one had any reason to believe the day would become one they would talk about for years. Claire Monroe tugged her light raincoat a little closer around her, but left it unbuttoned. Old canvas sneakers squeaked faintly against the pavement as she guided her preschool class between rows of colorful booths. Her long, sandy hair was braided loosely on both sides and tucked behind her ears, more from habit than vanity. In one hand, she held a clipboard with the children's names and emergency contacts, her thumb tapping the edges in a quiet rhythm. Her eyes were never still. They moved from face to face, small hand to small hand, counting and recounting without even meaning to. "Stay with the group, please," she reminded them, her voice warm but firm in that way children trusted. Nobody goes off on their own. Near the front, a little girl in a pink dress and tiny rain boots patterned with daisies skipped ahead, clutching a plastic cup of lemonade like it was a treasure. Her name was Rosie, and she had the kind of wide blue eyes that seemed to take in more than she ever said. "Rosie, sweetheart, stay close," Claire called, raising her voice just enough to float above the chatter. "You can watch the puppet show, but you stay where I can see you, okay?" Rosie turned, grinned, and nodded obediently before drifting toward the striped tent where a crowd of children had already gathered. The puppet show, the scent of popcorn, the eager tug of other kids' excitement. Everything in that moment felt harmless, ordinary. The kind of day a mother stored away to tell her child about when they were grown and living far from home. Then the sky cracked open. There was no slow warning, no gentle rumble that gave people time to look up. Thunder roared in a single violent burst, and within seconds the first shards of ice fell. Small at first, then heavier, faster, the sound of them like stones on metal. The fair's joyful hum collapsed into chaos. Parents grabbed children by whatever they could reach. Vendors scrambled to pull tarps over their stalls. Teachers shouted names into a wind that suddenly had teeth. "Hail everyone inside the Civic Center!" A voice barked over the loudspeaker, distorted but urgent. Claire turned in a tight circle, lips moving as she counted. "Eli, Hannah, Leo." Her gaze jumped from face to face. "Rosie?" Her chest tightened. "Rosie?" There was no pink dress in sight. The hail hit harder, marble-sized ice bouncing off the pavement, stinging exposed skin. Claire shoved through the crowd, calling her daughter's name again and again, her voice growing hoarse. Her eyes burned, not from the cold, but from the sharp, familiar panic that lived in the softest part of her heart. She had lost so much once. She could not lose this child. A block away at the edge of the park, a sleek black SUV rolled to a slow stop. The tinted window slid down with a quiet hum, letting in the sound of the storm. Inside sat Ethan Hale, a single dad and the kind of CEO newspapers like to call a self-made millionaire, as if that explained everything about him. Moments earlier, he had been walking out of a high-stakes investor meeting at the Civic Center, his mind full of numbers, projections, and the next big decision he should make. He had planned to clear his head with a quick walk before heading back to his office. Instead, he watched the sky turn violent. Through the blur of falling ice, something small and pink caught his eye near the sidewalk. Movement where there shouldn't have been any. A little girl, curled beneath a metal bench, arms over her head, knees pulled in, hailstones bouncing around her like hard, white pebbles. Her shoulders shook with every strike of ice. He didn't weigh the options. He didn't think about his suit, or his schedule, or the fact that people who owned companies weren't supposed to sprint into storms like reckless teenagers. He shoved open the car door and ran. The hail slammed into his shoulders and back, each impact a sharp, cold sting. He lowered his head and pushed forward until he dropped to one knee beside the bench. "Hey," he said, his voice low but steady beneath the roar of the storm. "You're okay now, I've got you." The girl lifted her head slowly. Wide blue eyes, wet with tears, stared back at him. "I lost my mommy," she whispered, her lips trembling. "I know," Ethan said softly, "but you're not alone anymore." He shrugged out of his wool coat and wrapped it around her small frame, lifting her into his arms with a careful strength that came less from habit and more from something instinctive. She clung to his collar as if he were the only solid thing in a collapsing world, her face pressing into his shoulder while the storm raged on. Inside the SUV, the sound of the hail softened to a drumming on the roof, like 1,000 fingers tapping to be let in. Ethan settled the little girl into the passenger seat, his hands moving a little clumsily but with a quiet care. He turned on the heater, the warm air whispering through the vents, and found an old fleece blanket in the back seat from forgotten soccer practices and late-night drives with his son. He draped it over her shoulders and buckled the seatbelt across her small frame. Her hair, a halo of damp curls, clung to her forehead. Color slowly returned to her cheeks as the warmth seeped into her bones. "What's your name?" he asked softly. She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand in the unself-conscious way children do. "Rosie," she murmured. "Hi, Rosie, I'm Ethan." He offered a small smile, trying to keep his voice gentle, steady. "We'll find your mom, okay? You're safe with me." She studied him for a long moment, as if measuring the truth in his words, then nodded. Her eyes flicked over his face, his dark hair damp from the storm, the faint lines of worry at the corners of his mouth, the tie askew at his throat. Then, in a small voice, she said, "My mom used to tell me about you." The words struck harder than any hailstone. Ethan blinked, thinking he'd misheard her over the thrum of the storm. "What did you say, sweetheart?" Rosie pulled the blanket closer, that tiny, shy smile appearing at the edge of her lips, a dimple peeking through her left cheek. "My mom tells me stories," she said, as if this were the most ordinary thing in the world. "About a man who's brave and kind. I think it's you." For a moment, Ethan forgot the storm entirely. The world narrowed to the soft, steady whir of the heater and the small girl beside him. Something shifted in his chest, a soundless click, like a lock turning after years of being stuck. He didn't recognize her. He didn't even know her mother's name. But there was something in her voice, in that strange familiarity, that stirred up memories he'd long ago boxed up and pushed to the back of his mind. Late nights in college libraries, a girl with braids and lavender tucked into her notebooks, laughter echoing in hallways. Another life, another him. Outside, the siren of an ambulance wailed faintly in the distance, pulling him back. People would be heading to the community medical center. That's where her mother would go if she'd been separated from her child. Fear, he knew, drove parents in straight lines. "Okay, Rosie," he said quietly, reaching for the ignition. "We're going to the clinic. I bet your mom is already looking for you there." She nodded and settled back, trusting with the effortless faith only children seem to manage. As he drove, Ethan glanced at her from time to time, his mind circling her words. "My mom used to tell me about you." How could that be? He was nobody's bedtime story. He was headlines and spreadsheets, boardrooms and crisis meetings. Whatever kindness he'd once been known for felt buried beneath years of ambition and mistakes. At the Willowbrook Community Medical Center, the hallways were crowded and loud, a patchwork of voices and worry. Nurses called names over the murmur of conversation. Children cried in short, sharp bursts. The air smelled faintly of disinfectant and wet wool. Claire pushed through the sea of bodies, her lungs burning from running and from fear that wouldn't loosen its grip. "Excuse me," she said to a nurse at the desk, her voice thin but determined. "My daughter is missing. Rosie Monroe, 5 years old, blue eyes, wearing a pink dress. We were at the fair when the hail started." The nurse scanned a list on her clipboard, then looked up with a small, reassuring nod. "Room 9, straight down this hallway, then to the left. She's safe." Safe. The word nearly buckled Claire's knees. She swallowed hard and moved forward, guided less by her feet and more by pure instinct, her heart pounding in her ears. At the doorway, she stopped. Through the narrow window, she saw a man in a damp white shirt, gray suit jacket draped over a plastic chair. He sat hunched forward, carefully toweling Rosie's hair dry, his movements almost reverent for such an ordinary task. The storm had left his clothes wrinkled, his dark hair mussed, but his expression was what stopped her breath. Gone was the polished, distant look she once associated with him. The man always half distracted, already halfway out the door toward his next big idea. Instead, his eyes were soft, focused, gentle. His brow furrowed with quiet concern, as if nothing in the world mattered more than the little girl in front of him. Rosie sat calm and perfectly still, eyes closed, trusting his touch in a way children reserve only for those who feel safe. Claire's hand tightened on the doorframe. Ethan Hale. Of all the people in all the cities and all the years between then and now, it had to be him. Claire forced herself to move. Her fingers curled around the handle as she pushed the door open. The hinges gave a soft creak that made Rosie's eyes snap open. "Mommy!" Rosie squealed, sliding off the chair and running full speed into her arms. Claire dropped to her knees and caught her, pulling her close, breathing in the damp, familiar scent of her daughter's hair. For a moment, the world shrank to just that heartbeat, that warmth, that proof that she was still here. "I was so scared," Claire whispered into her hair. "I couldn't find you." "I got lost," Rosie said, words tumbling over one another. "But he found me, he saved me." She turned, still clinging to Claire's neck, and pointed with a small, proud smile. "This is the man from your stories, right?" The sentence sliced through the room like lightning. Claire froze. She had never said his name to Rosie. Not once. In 5 years, she had only ever given her a few small pieces. Stories of a kind man who used to make her laugh, who believed she was capable of more than she thought, who smelled like coffee and lavender and possibility. A man who had vanished before he knew what he'd left behind. And there he was. Ethan rose slowly from the chair, as if any sudden movement might shatter the fragile air. His eyes met hers. For a moment, time didn't feel linear. It folded, pulling their past into the fluorescent-lit present, filling the space between them with words they hadn't said and choices they hadn't undone. "Claire," he said softly. Her name in his voice felt like something she hadn't let herself miss until now. Her heart gave an uncomfortable, traitorous stutter. "Hi," she managed. Rosie glanced between them with open curiosity, like she had walked into a movie halfway through and sensed there was a history she didn't yet understand. "You still wear your hair the same," Ethan said after a long beat, his voice quieter, as if he was afraid of hearing himself. Claire instinctively reached up and brushed the edge of a braid over her shoulder. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she said, her throat tight. "Least of all like this." He was broader than she remembered, more grounded somehow, as if life had sanded off some restless edges but carved in deeper lines into others. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes that didn't come from the storm. "Are you okay?" he asked gently. "I am now," she answered, looking down at Rosie, who leaned into her side with the easy trust of a child who had no idea how complicated adults could be. Ethan's gaze shifted to Rosie. Something flickered there. Something deep, searching, almost painful. Claire could see him trying to solve a puzzle without all the pieces, but he didn't ask any questions, not yet. She stepped back before the moment could stretch into something she wasn't ready to face. "Thank you," she said, her voice trembling even as she tried to steady it. "For helping her, for finding her." He gave a small nod, jaw tightening for a moment, as if he was holding back everything else he wanted to say. His eyes lingered on Rosie a second longer than was casual, then returned to Claire with an expression she couldn't quite read. Curiosity, recognition, regret all layered together. Claire turned towards the hallway. The crowd had thinned, but her pulse hadn't. She guided Rosie out, her hand firm but gentle on the little girl's shoulder. Just before they rounded the corner, she let herself look back. Ethan was still standing in the same spot, his tall frame framed by the harsh hospital light. He hadn't moved. He watched them go with an expression that made something old and fragile stir in her chest. Something about that unmoving silhouette told her this wasn't a closed chapter unexpectedly reopened. This was the first line of something new. The next afternoon, when the sky was clear again, and only a few stray pieces of ice lingered in the shaded corners of the town, Claire's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. She wiped her hands on a dish towel and glanced at the screen. A single word glowed back at her. "Coffee?" Her breath caught. No name, but there didn't need to be one. The old ache in her chest answered before her head could. 6 years since she had last seen his number light up her phone, and still one small invitation could make her heart feel too big for her ribs. She stared at the message longer than necessary, long enough to consider ignoring it, deleting it, pretending the fair and the storm in the hospital room had never happened. But memory has its own gravity. So does unfinished business. "Okay," she typed finally. "Same place?" He replied almost instantly. "By the lake, 2 o'clock. They met at a small cafe that sat on the edge of Willowbrook Lake, the place that had once been their refuge when life had felt like an open road. The ivy still climbed up the brick walls. The old wooden chairs still creaked when you sat down. The water beyond the porch still held the sky like a secret. Ethan arrived early, of course. He always had. He stood when she walked up, his hand drifting to the back of his neck in that familiar nervous gesture she never thought she'd see again. "Claire," he greeted. "Hey," she replied softly, offering a careful smile. They ordered coffee and for a while talked about everything that didn't matter. The hailstorm, the repairs around town, the new library wing. But silence has a way of tugging at loose threads. Sooner or later, something important always unravels. "It was 6 years ago," Ethan said at last, his voice softer than the breeze brushing the lake's surface. "Feels like another life. Or 10. Claire traced the rim of her mug with her fingertip, watching the coffee tremble slightly. "Sometimes it feels like yesterday," she admitted. There was no accusation in her tone, just a tired honesty that comes when you run out of ways to make the past prettier than it was. He hesitated, looking down at his hands, at the faint callus where he still gripped a pen too tightly in meetings. "Back then," he began slowly, "I thought I was building something that would finally prove I wasn't a mistake. The company consumed everything. My pitch deck felt more familiar than my own reflection. Investors were circling. New York was calling. And all I could hear was that voice in my head saying, 'If you don't take this now, it's gone forever.'" She nodded once. "I remember." Late nights when his phone was never on silent, half-finished dinners, promises that he'd make it up to her when things calmed down, as if life ever truly did. "I told myself I had to go," he continued. "That if I didn't make it happen right then, I'd lose everything." His jaw tightened. What I didn't see was what I was already losing. Claire looked out toward the lake where the sunlight shimmered on the water's surface, gliding like thoughts that refused to stay in one place. Ducks floated in the distance, unbothered by the heaviness two humans carried on shore. "We never really ended," she said quietly. "Not properly." The words were careful, but there was a wound beneath them. "You just disappeared." He swallowed hard. I think I told myself it was temporary, that once I got the deal, once the company was steady, once I wasn't drowning, I'd come back and explain everything." He let out a humorless breath. "But the longer I stayed away, the harder it was to be the man who walked back through that door. I wasn't brave enough to face you, so I let time do my running for me." "You didn't even say goodbye, Ethan," she said, not harshly, just as a fact that had lived in her chest for years. "I know," he repeated, his voice cracked on the word, "and I've regretted it every day since." They sat in silence, listening to the faint clink of dishes from inside the cafe, the soft whoosh of a car passing by on the road behind them. Somewhere, a wind chime tinkled, thin and clear. "You meant something to me," Claire said at last, her eyes fixed on the water. "More than I was willing to admit at the time. Maybe we weren't meant to be a story that finished, but we were more than a page you flip past." He looked at her then, really looked, as if trying to reconcile the girl he'd known with the woman sitting across from him. A mother now, a teacher, someone who had survived things he hadn't been there to see. "You weren't a page, Claire," he said quietly. "You were the chapter I just walked out of mid-sentence." She didn't answer, but the rigid line of her shoulders softened slightly. He told her about what came next, how success had not been the straight arrow the world imagined, how 2 years ago, everything nearly collapsed when a key investor pulled out at the worst possible moment. Accounts froze, headlines turned cruel, and suddenly the man on magazine covers became the punchline to a cautionary tale. "My wife left during that time," he said. Her name was Lauren. You didn't know about her. We married fast in the middle of all the noise. On paper, it looked perfect. 2 people who photographed well together. But when the money teetered and the press turned, she was gone in weeks. Our son, Noah, had just turned 1. He paused, clearing his throat. I remember holding him at 3 a.m, the house too quiet, and realizing I didn't know the first thing about being a father. I was exhausted, angry, scared, but he needed me, so I learned. Clumsily, slowly, burned a lot of pancakes, sat through a lot of crying, his and mine. Claire listened, hands wrapped around her mug like it was an anchor. "How old is he now?" she asked softly. 3, Ethan said. "He lives with me. Some nights he still cries out for his mom. I don't have good answers for him, just a pair of arms that don't leave." Her eyes glistened. "I'm raising Rosie alone too," she said after a moment. "No one knows who her father is. I never told anyone." She let the words hang there, then continued more gently. But I used to tell her stories about a man who was kind when kindness was rare, who made me feel like the world might still be good. Not because he was perfect, just because he saw me. Ethan's jaw tightened, as though he was holding back 1,000 questions and a lifetime of regret. Somewhere between them, the unspoken grew heavy, waiting for its turn to be named. They paid the bill and stepped off the cafe's porch into the late afternoon light. The air had that crisp clarity that comes after a stormy day, as if the sky had taken a deep breath and decided to start over. Near the entrance, on a faded rug, Rosie sat cross-legged with a stack of picture books, humming to herself. Her pink dress spread around her like a small, cheerful cloud. "Mom," she called, holding up a book about ocean animals. "Look, the whale is bigger than the house." Claire smiled and walked over. Ethan followed at a respectful distance, unsure of the lines he was allowed to cross now. Rosie scrambled to her feet and dusted off her tights as if the crumbs of the day could be brushed away that easily. "I have something for you, Mr. Ethan," she said suddenly, her voice proud. She dug into her little backpack with great ceremony, brow furrowed in concentration. Finally, she pulled out a small, flattened sprig of dried lavender pressed between 2 pieces of wax paper. She held it out with both hands, as if offering a crown. "This is for you," she declared. "Mommy says you like this smell." Ethan froze, surprise flickering across his features. He took the bundle gently, careful not to crush it between his fingers. "I do," he said, his voice softer. "I really do. Lavender." He was pulled back in an instant to nights in college when Claire would mark her favorite books with sprigs of it, tucking them between pages. The scent had lingered on his sweatshirt long after she'd hugged him goodbye, long after he'd walked home replaying their conversations in his head. He remembered how he used to joke that he could find her blindfolded in a crowd just by the trail of lavender and coffee. He glanced at Claire. She looked away, but a faint, wistful smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. As Rosie skipped ahead toward the car, humming some tune she'd made up on the spot, Ethan stood with the lavender pressed between his thumb and forefinger. Some wounds, he realized, never fully closed. They just scabbed over, waiting for the slightest brush to bleed again. But some memories, some stayed soft, no matter how much time tried to harden them. The day after the hailstorm, an email arrived from the school district. The preschool building where Claire taught had suffered roof damage. Repairs would take at least 48 hours. Classes were canceled. Claire exhaled slowly as she read the message at her small kitchen table, the morning sunlight slanting across the worn wood. She had planned to spend the unexpected days off with Rosie, make pancakes shaped like hearts, maybe sort through the growing pile of papers on the counter. But another email arrived shortly after. A district-wide budget meeting that afternoon. Required attendance. Lead early childhood representative, Claire Monroe. "Of course," she muttered, rubbing her temples. Life rarely asked permission before complicating things. Across the room, Rosie twirled in her familiar pink dress, now freshly washed, singing to herself as she made her stuffed animals talk to each other. Claire watched her for a moment, love and exhaustion tangling together the way they so often did for single parents. She scrolled through her contacts, thumb hovering over names. Neighbors who worked afternoons, friends who lived too far away, an older woman from church who already watched 3 grandchildren. No one felt quite right. The clock ticked louder than it needed to. In the end, fate, or something that felt suspiciously like it, made the decision for her. Downtown, at the small children's bookstore where storytime circles and mismatched chairs made every corner feel like a nook in some grandmother's house. Claire and Rosie stepped inside just to kill a bit of time before she tried again to solve the puzzle of childcare. The bell over the door chimed softly. "Hey!" Rosie squealed suddenly, eyes lighting up. A small boy with dark hair and a solemn face looked up from a dinosaur book on the rug. Then he smiled, slow and shy. "You," he said simply. "From the park!" Rosie cried, and threw her arms around him with the kind of uncomplicated affection only children can manage. Ethan, crouched beside the boy, Noah, stood up when he saw Claire. His expression was unreadable for a moment, then settled into something that wasn't exactly surprise and wasn't quite ease, but lived somewhere in between. "We meet again," he said quietly. "Looks like the kids already made friends," Claire replied, glancing at Rosie and Noah, now sitting shoulder to shoulder, their heads almost touching as they examined a pop-up dragon. There was a softness in her voice she didn't mean to show, but it slipped out anyway. Noah doesn't usually warm up to kids this fast, Ethan admitted, glancing down at the two of them on the rug. He's cautious. Rosie adopts everyone, Claire said with a faint smile. Stuffed animals, teachers, grocery store cashiers. They watched in quiet companionship as the children turned the pages of the pop-up book, gasping at cardboard dragons and laughing at the way a knight's helmet sprang up. For a moment, things felt strangely easy, like they had slipped into some alternate life where this was normal. Running into each other at bookstores, kids already bonded, history softened by time. Then reality nudged its way back in. Schools closed for the next couple of days after the storm, Claire said, more to herself than to him. And I just found out I've got a mandatory board meeting this afternoon. I was trying to figure out what to do with Rosie. She hesitated. I hate dragging her from one stranger to another. Ethan looked at the kids, then back at Claire. Something settled in his expression, a quiet resolve. If you trust me, he said slowly, I can take them both. Noah would love the company, and clearly they're already a team. She hesitated, the weight of so many what-ifs pressing down on her. Part of her wanted to say no, to keep everything neat and separate, to protect the fragile balance she'd built. Another part of her saw Rosie's face turned up toward Noah's, saw the way her daughter already laughed more freely with this little boy beside her. And Ethan. She could still see him kneeling in the hail, shrugging off his coat without a second thought. Just for the afternoon, Claire said finally. I'll be back for her by 5. I'll have them home before then, he promised. The small zoo on the outskirts of town was quieter than usual, the storm having scared off most of the weekend crowd. It was the perfect place for 2 children and a man trying to remember what uncomplicated joy felt like. Rosie grabbed Noah's hand the moment they stepped through the gates, pulling him toward the first enclosure with breathless excitement. Look, she cried, it's a lion, he's sleepy. Noah, usually careful and reserved, let himself be pulled along, his face softening into a grin. Together they darted from the elephants to the giraffes, to a pair of otters that slid through the water like living commas. Rosie named the animals as if they were characters in a bedtime story. Noah echoed her, his voice gaining confidence with each repetition. Ethan sat on a nearby bench, lukewarm coffee cooling in his hands, watching them. Noah's laughter rang through the air, that high, bright sound he didn't hear often enough. And Rosie, there was something about her that tugged at him. The way she cocked her head when she asked a question, the small crease between her brows when she was thinking hard, the way she observed the world as if it were both miracle and mystery. Later, as they sat at a picnic table with melting ice cream cones, Rosie swung her feet and watched a cloud drift lazily across the sky. Mr. Ethan, she asked suddenly, have you ever loved someone so much that you still remember them all the time, even when you're busy? The question caught him off guard. He set his cone down slowly. Yes, he said after a moment, his voice low. I have. And I think I never really stopped remembering. Rosie nodded, as if he'd only confirmed what she already suspected. That's how my mom is, she said with simple certainty. She remembers someone, too. He didn't ask who. Some answers, he knew, arrived when they were ready, not when you demanded them. When the clouds rolled in again, threatening another shower, Ethan shepherded the kids into a small bookstore near the zoo. While Rosie and Noah settled into a corner piled with cushions and picture books, he wandered to the back, drawn by a wooden display of art supplies. One item caught his eye, a carved wooden box filled with colored pencils, the lid smooth and pale, an engraving service offered on a small handwritten sign. He didn't know why he picked it up. Maybe it was the memory of Claire sketching in the margins of her notebooks, collecting little boxes like this one as if they were relics from another time. At the counter, he slid the box forward. Could you engrave something on the lid? He asked. Sure, the clerk said, picking up a slim tool. What would you like it to say? He pictured Rosie's eager face at the lion's cage, her serious little frown when she concentrated, the quiet wisdom of her question about love. Right, Rosie's world, Basita, he said. Back in the car, as the sky turned the color of late afternoon gold, he handed the box to her. For you, he said. Her mouth fell open. For me? She traced the letters with her fingertips, sounding them out softly. Rosie's world. Then she hugged the box to her chest. I'm going to draw everything I love, she whispered. This is my favorite thing ever. On the drive back, both children eventually went quiet. their voices fading into soft breaths. He glanced in the rearview mirror and saw them slumped against each other, heads tilted, mouths slightly open. For a fleeting second, with the two small faces side by side, something tightened in his chest. There was something about Rosie's profile, the shape of her chin, the way her lashes fanned across her cheeks. He told himself it was nothing, just a trick of light, a tired mind making patterns where there were none. He pulled into Claire's driveway, the sky painted in streaks of pink and orange, and carried the memory of Rosie's sleepy smile with him long after he watched her run back into her mother's arms. That night, after the dishes were done and Noah had been tucked into bed with his stuffed fox and a story about a brave rabbit who always found his way home, the house finally went quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your thoughts louder. Ethan sat at his desk in the home office, the blue glow of his laptop screen reflecting off untouched spreadsheets and quarterly projections. Numbers lined up neatly in rows, waiting for his attention, but he hadn't read a single line. Instead, he saw a pink dress and a pair of blue eyes that had looked up at him from under a bench in a storm. He heard a small voice asking if grown-ups still remembered the people they loved, even when they were busy. And beneath it all, woven through his thoughts like a song he couldn't stop humming, were her earlier words. "My mom used to tell me about you." He leaned back in his chair and rubbed his temples. There were things about Rosie he couldn't shake off now that he'd spent more time with her. The way she tilted her head when she was curious. The way her brow furrowed when she concentrated so hard on a drawing that the rest of the world disappeared. Even the way she absently turned an imaginary ring around her thumb when she was thinking. He caught himself doing the same thing with his actual ring finger sometimes, out of old habit. He thought about the timeline he'd tried not to look at too closely. 6 years since he'd left town. 5 years since Rosie was born. The math was painfully simple. He closed the laptop. The numbers could wait. They'd always waited for him, and they always would. The truth, once it started knocking, didn't knock politely for long. The next morning, Ethan put on his usual armor. A tailored charcoal suit, a crisp white shirt, the calm, collected expression that executives are expected to wear. In his hands, he carried an envelope from his company, an official donation for the preschool's classroom supplies. It was a reasonable reason to show up. Respectable, professional, almost believable, even to himself. At Willowbrook Preschool, children's artwork lined the hallways, sunbursts and stick figures and rainbows taped haphazardly to colored walls. The scent of crayons and glue took him back to days when he thought success meant something completely different. He was discussing the donation with the director when he heard it, a delighted gasp. "Mr. Ethan!" Rosie barreled down the hallway before anyone could stop her and threw her arms around his waist. He dropped to one knee automatically, hugging her back. Her joy was simple, unfiltered, and it hit him with terrifying force. "Hey there," he said softly. "Didn't expect to get tackled this early in the day." Over her shoulder, he saw Claire standing in the classroom doorway, frozen. Her expression carefully neutral, but her eyes anything but. Surprise, worry, and something else flickered there. Something that looked a lot like fear. Another teacher nearby chuckled lightly. "They really do look alike," she said without thinking. "Same eyes, same smile. It's uncanny." The word hung in the air. Ethan saw the way Claire stiffened, how her hand automatically reached for the doorframe as if she needed something solid to hold on to. She stepped forward quickly, redirecting the conversation with practiced ease, guiding Rosie back into the classroom with a warm but firm touch. "Say goodbye, honey," she murmured. "Mr. Ethan has work to do." He left without protesting, without forcing another moment in a hallway full of watching eyes. But as he walked back to his car, his heart pounded a little too fast and the world seemed sharper around the edges. An hour later, he stood on Claire's front porch. The house was small but cared for, the kind of place where wind chimes hung from the eaves and a pair of rain boots sat neatly by the door. Leaning against the railing was a small pink bicycle, its paint slightly chipped but clearly loved. Across the side of the frame, in uneven letters that looked hand-painted, were 2 initials, RH. He stared at them, his breath catching in a way he hadn't expected. Rosie Hale, his mind whispered before he could argue with it. Or maybe Rosie Monroe, Holden Hale, some messy combination of a life split in 2. He didn't know if Claire had meant for those letters to say anything at all. But something in him tightened as if the universe had just placed one more piece on the table. Before he could talk himself out of it, he knocked. The door opened a moment later. Claire stood there, her expression shifting from surprise to something closer to dread in the span of a heartbeat. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice soft but wary. "Yes," Ethan said quietly, every word carefully measured. "It's about Rosie." He stepped inside when she moved aside, the familiar creak of the floorboard in the entryway startling him with how much he remembered. The house smelled faintly of laundry soap and cinnamon, the scent of a place lived in, not staged. Claire folded her arms, not defensively, but like someone bracing herself for a wave she knew was coming. Ethan reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something small, holding it carefully in his palm. "She dropped this yesterday," he said, his voice low, "outside the zoo. It was a beaded bracelet, the kind children make in after-school programs from cheap plastic and endless enthusiasm." A heart-shaped charm dangled from the center. On it, stamped in tiny letters, were two initials, E.H. "She said she made it herself," Ethan continued. "She said the letters are for someone important." He lifted his eyes to meet Claire's. "Who helped her spell that, Claire?" Her lips parted, but no sound came out. For a second, she looked as if he'd reached into her chest and pulled out something she'd kept hidden there for years. "I counted," he said quietly, the words shaking now despite his effort to keep them steady. 6 years since I left, 5 since she was born. You vanished without a word. And now there's a little girl with my eyes, my mannerisms, and my initials dangling from her wrist like a secret she doesn't even know she's carrying. "Ethan," Claire whispered, but he didn't stop. "You were everywhere back then," she said finally, her voice frayed. "On magazine covers, business podcasts, glowing profiles about how you were changing the world. You were about to get married. You were..." She swallowed hard. "You were already halfway gone. I was a loose end from a town you outgrew." "No," he said, almost too quickly. "You were the part I never could look at because I knew what I'd thrown away." He took a step closer, the distance between them shrinking to something almost unbearable. "Tell me the truth," he said, each word weighted. "Is she mine?" The room seemed to hold its breath. For a long moment, Claire didn't move. Then, as if something inside her finally gave up on the fiction she'd been telling herself, she let the tears spill over. She gave the smallest of nods. "Yes," she whispered, "she's yours." The air left his lungs in a rush. He reached blindly for the back of a chair, fingers tightening around the wood. "All this time," he said, barely above a whisper, "I had a daughter and I didn't even know her name." His voice broke on the last word. "I wasn't hiding her to hurt you," Claire said, stepping forward, her own hands shaking. "I was trying to protect her. You were on the edge of breaking when you left. Then the articles, the near collapse, the divorce. I didn't know if you would even survive it all. I thought showing up with a baby would bury you." He let out a short, bitter sound that wasn't quite a laugh. "She's not a weight, Claire. She's the only thing that might have saved me from myself." Silence stretched between them, tangled with grief for years they could never get back. He turned away for a moment, pressing the heel of his hand to his eyes. When he faced her again, there was something steadier in his gaze, even through the wetness still clinging to his lashes. "I need time," he said slowly, "not to forgive you. There's enough blame to go around, and I've earned my share. I need time to learn how to be a father to her, to understand what that even means when I've already missed her first steps, her first words, the first time she called someone daddy." He slipped the bracelet back into his pocket like it was made of glass. Then he turned toward the door, his shoulders heavy with the weight of a life that had just shifted on its axis. He was almost to the steps when he heard a small voice behind him. "Mr. Ethan?" He turned. Rosie stood in the hallway, clutching a worn lavender-colored plush bunny, her socks too big, her hair slightly tousled from a nap. She looked up at him with those open, earnest eyes that saw more than most adults ever did. "Don't be sad," she said with simple certainty. "Mommy says good people always find their way back to where they belong." His chest ached so sharply it felt physical. He knelt down so they were eye level and brushed a stray curl from her cheek, his fingers trembling. "I promise," he said, his voice thick. "I'll come back, okay?" Rosie studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded solemnly and wrapped her arms around his neck with fierce, childlike trust. He held her a moment longer than he should have, memorizing the weight of her, the way she fit against him as if she had always belonged there. As he walked away, the evening sky stretched out in bands of pink and gold. In his pocket was a child's bracelet with his initials on it. In his heart, for the first time in years, was something like a beginning. Ethan didn't rush, though every part of him wanted to. After walking away from Claire's porch with Rosie's bracelet in his pocket and her words in his ears, he understood something he'd never grasped in his 20s. Some things could not be fixed with grand gestures or overnight promises. Some things had to grow slowly, like roots. He started simply. He showed up. He volunteered to help with a weekend art project at the preschool, sitting at a low plastic table while children smeared paint across paper and occasionally across his sleeves. Rosie sat beside him, tongue sticking out slightly as she drew a sky full of purple clouds. Every now and then, she'd bump his shoulder gently, as if testing whether he was still there. He was. He took Noah and Rosie to the park after school, pushing them side by side on the swings, listening to their laughter float into the twilight. He didn't call himself her father. Not yet. Instead, he listened, learned the rhythm of her stories, the way she could stretch a simple trip to the grocery store into an adventure with dragons hiding in cereal boxes. Do grown-ups forget people they love if they're too busy? She asked one evening, legs pumping on the swing as wind tangled her hair. He swallowed. No, sweetheart, he answered. They might try, they might pretend, but real love doesn't forget. It just waits, sometimes in the wrong places. Rosie nodded, as if she understood more than he wanted her to. Claire remained cautious. She didn't fling the doors of her life wide open. She opened them a sliver at a time. She allowed him to pick up Rosie once a week from school, then twice. She invited him in for coffee after dropping the kids off from the park, then started leaving an extra mug on the shelf, just in case. Trust, he realized, wasn't a single decision. It was 100 little ones, spread over mornings and evenings and the quiet in between. Noah changed too. The boy who once hovered near his father's leg, wary of everything new, began to run ahead with Rosie, dragging her toward puddles and playground slides. He started calling Claire Miss Claire with a kind of shy affection that twisted something deep in Ethan's chest. One Tuesday, when the sky was the soft gray of a half-remembered dream, Ethan's phone buzzed. He answered to hear the strain in Claire's voice. The sitter for the daycare canceled last minute, she said, and I'm stuck in a staff conference. Noah's already been signed out and is waiting on the steps. Could you? I'm on my way, he said before she could finish. Later, when he brought Noah to Claire's house to wait out the last of her meeting, he stepped through the front door and stopped. On the living room rug, Rosie and Noah sat surrounded by a sea of building blocks, constructing a lopsided tower that might have been a spaceship or a castle, depending on who you asked. Claire knelt between them, reading from a picture book in a low, animated voice. One hand rested gently on Noah's hair, fingers moving in absent, soothing circles. For a moment, Ethan couldn't breathe. This was what he'd never had as a child. This simple scene of warmth and safety, of children absorbed in their worlds, of an adult's presence steady as a heartbeat. It felt like stumbling across something sacred. When Claire noticed him watching from the doorway, she startled slightly, then smiled, a little flushed. They built that all by themselves, she said, nodding toward the wobbly tower. I just provided sound effects. Noah ran to him, hugging his leg. Rosie followed, looping an arm around his waist. Standing there with two small bodies pressed against him and Claire looking up at him from the floor, he had the strange, powerful sense that he was already standing in the life he'd always thought he was too broken to deserve. He just didn't know how long he'd be allowed to keep it. On a bright Saturday morning, the world seemed almost determined to pretend that storms didn't exist. The sky stretched wide and blue over Willowbrook Park, the grass still lush from recent rain. Children's laughter rose from the playground, birds argued in the trees, and the wind carried the faint scent of grilled onions from a nearby food truck. Ethan stood behind the swings, giving gentle pushes. Rosie leaned back, toes pointed at the sky, hair flying behind her like a banner. Noah, on the next swing over, clutched the chains with serious concentration, but there was a smile tugging at his lips too. Higher, Daddy, Rosie called. Higher, but not to the moon, he answered. I'm still working on the rocket ship. Rosie giggled. Noah chimed in. We can build it with Legos later. For a few minutes, everything felt beautifully ordinary. Well, a cool voice cut in from behind him. Isn't this domestic? The world snapped tight. Ethan turned. Lauren stood a few feet away, heels too high for the playground mulch. A tailored coat draped perfectly over her shoulders. Her hair was flawless, her lipstick sharp. Sunglasses rested on top of her head as if the sun existed for her convenience alone. Her gaze flicked from Ethan to Noah, then to Rosie and back again, taking in the scene with an appraising chill. "Noah," she cooed, arms opening. "Come say hi to Mommy." The swing slowed. Noah's feet dragged in the dirt. He looked from Lauren to Ethan, uncertainty clouding his eyes. Ethan stepped slightly in front of him, one hand coming to rest on his son's shoulder. "Go ahead and say hi," Ethan said quietly, not wanting the boy to feel trapped. Noah slid off the swing and approached Lauren cautiously. She hugged him briefly, her hands light, as if she were afraid to wrinkle her coat. After a pepperheadness, she straightened and motioned Ethan aside. "We should talk," she said, all sugary courtesy on the surface and ice underneath. They walked a few steps away, far enough that the children couldn't hear, but close enough that Ethan could still see them out of the corner of his eye. Near the picnic tables, Claire stood watching, having just arrived with a bag of snacks. Her posture tightened as she took in the scene, but she stayed where she was, eyes never leaving the kids. "I want to come back," Lauren said without preamble, crossing her arms. "To Noah's life, to yours." "You left when he was barely talking," Ethan replied, keeping his tone even. "You didn't call, you didn't write." Her smile thinned. "And now you're back in the news for all the right reasons. The company is stable again. Investors are raving. The redemption narrative is practically writing itself. I'm just here to complete the picture. Miles," she caught herself, corrected, "Noah is my son. He belongs with me as much as he does with you. You're not part of this story anymore," Ethan said quietly. "Not like that." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Then I'll fight for custody. I have every right. And the courts might find it interesting that you've been less than transparent. Single father with a history of burnout, near bankruptcy, and now a hidden child people are whispering about? That sweet little girl who looks like she could be yours?" Her eyes flicked toward Rosie and Claire, standing together near the bench. "Judges don't like secrets." His jaw tensed. "Don't drag them into this." "Oh, but you already have," she murmured. "Haven't you?" She turned on her heel and walked away, leaving the scent of expensive perfume and threats in her wake. That night, the warmth that had been slowly building around Ethan's fragile makeshift family felt suddenly fragile. He sat on Claire's couch, hands clasped, explaining everything. Lauren's visit, her veiled threats, the word custody hanging between them like a storm cloud. Claire listened in silence, arms folded tightly across her chest, her gaze fixed on a spot on the coffee table. Rosie had fallen asleep in her room, Noah on a makeshift bed in the living room, unaware of the storm gathering in the grown-up world. "I knew something would come to take this away," she whispered finally. "I just didn't know what form it would take." "I won't let her," Ethan said. I'll fight her with everything I have. For Noah, I'm not talking about her," Claire cut in, her voice cracking. "I'm talking about us. I've seen how quickly things can fall apart with you, Ethan. I can't let Rosie or Noah get caught in the middle of a war between you and your past." He took a step toward her, but she stepped back, shaking her head. "I think we need space," she said softly. "At least until this is settled. I can't risk their hearts because you're still fighting ghosts." The words hurt more than he expected. But he saw the fear in her eyes and knew it wasn't punishment. It was protection. For the two small souls sleeping down the hall. For the woman who had already rebuilt her life once from pieces. For the first time, Ethan understood that loving them meant more than just being present. It meant being willing to stand in front of the storm and not flinch, even if it meant standing alone. The law office sat high above the city, all glass and sharp angles. The kind of place where everything looked polished and no one ever raised their voice. Outside, traffic moved in thin streams far below. Inside, the air conditioner hummed faintly, doing nothing to soften the tension in the room. Lauren sat across from Ethan at the long conference table, one leg crossed over the other, her red lipstick precise, her smile cutting. Her attorney sat to her right, eyes on a neat stack of folders. Ethan's lawyer, a calm woman with gray at her temples, took notes in quiet, efficient strokes. "You always did look good under pressure," Lauren said, arranging her handbag beside her as if she were settling in for a show. "But let's not pretend you're in control here, Ethan." He didn't respond. He'd learned the power of silence, how it made some people talk more than they meant to. You want to play house with your old flame and her little girl? She continued. Fine, but Noah is my son, and the courts might be very interested to hear about your history. The near breakdown, the financial collapse, the fact that you've kept a possible second child conveniently out of the public eye doesn't exactly scream stability, does it? Ethan folded his hands. When he spoke, his voice was calm in a way that surprised even him. You mean the breakdown you walked away from, he said. When you packed your bags and left a 1-year-old who cried for you at every bedtime for months. She flinched almost imperceptibly, then recovered. That was survival, she said. No, he replied quietly, this is survival. He nodded to his attorney, who slid a folder across the table. Inside were printed documents, therapy records, notes from parenting classes he'd taken, statements from Noah's daycare teachers about his routines, his stability, the way he reached for his father when he was scared. There was a glowing psychological evaluation, too, one that described Ethan as highly engaged and deeply bonded with his son. Lauren's confident expression faltered as she skimmed the pages. Her lawyer leaned in, murmuring something she couldn't quite mask. And there's one more thing, Ethan said. He took a tablet from his briefcase, tapping the screen once. Noah wanted to say something. I hoped we wouldn't need this, but here we are. He pressed play. On the screen, Noah sat on his small bed, a stuffed fox cradled in his arms. His hair was slightly mussed, his pajamas wrinkled. His voice was soft but clear. Daddy reads to me every night, he said, and he makes pancakes on Sundays. Sometimes Miss Claire helps me draw spaceships. I like our house. I like my bed. I don't want it to change again. He paused, eyes dropping to the fox. When he looked back up, his gaze met the camera with surprising steadiness. I love my daddy, he said simply. When the video ended, the room was still. Even the hum of the air conditioner seemed to fade. Lauren's lawyer cleared his throat. Given the boy's attachment, the documented stability of his current home, and all of this, he said, tapping the folder, I would strongly advise against pursuing a contentious custody battle. It is unlikely to go in your favor and could cause Noah significant distress. Judges look closely at that, especially when one parent already provides a consistent primary home. Lauren's jaw tightened. The confident smile had slipped. This isn't over, she muttered as she stood, gathering her bag like a shield. It already is, Ethan said. Ethan said, not unkindly. At least for Noah. I won't keep you from seeing him if you come for him honestly and gently. But you don't get to use him to fix your image. He's not a prop. She hesitated, then turned and walked out, her heels clicking sharply down the hallway until the sound faded. Later, rain fell softly over Willowbrook, turning the streets slick and reflective. Ethan stood on Claire's front steps, a faint halo of porch light behind the screen door. His suit jacket was damp at the shoulders, his hair wet at the temples. When Claire opened the door, she looked tired, guarded, like someone who had been bracing for bad news. Is everything okay? She asked quietly. It's done, he said. She's not coming after Noah. My lawyer says she doesn't have a case worth taking to court, not without making herself look worse. She'll visit maybe if she learns how to show up for him, but he stays with me. Relief flickered across Claire's face, but so did hesitation, like a candle flame in a draft. And now? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Now, he said, stepping in closer, rain sliding down his jaw. I stopped letting fear write my story. She blinked, eyes searching his. I don't want another chance with the past, he continued, each word deliberate. I want a future, a real one. Messy, honest, not staged for anyone's camera. And when I picture that, he exhaled, as if saying the words out loud cost him something and freed him at the same time. It's you, Claire. It's Rosie. It's Noah. That's home to me. You're my home. For a heartbeat, she didn't move. Then something in her broke and mended at the same time. She stepped forward and into his arms, her face pressing against his chest as the weight of 6 years of what-ifs finally loosened. I was so scared, she whispered, fingers curling into his shirt. I didn't want to believe this could be real, that we could ever have something that doesn't just fall apart. You don't have to believe alone anymore, he murmured into her hair. We'll be scared together if we have to, but we won't run this time. Not from each other, not from them. Through the front window, 2 small faces peered out. Rosie and Noah, giggling softly at the sight of the grown-ups in the rain. In the reflection of the glass, 4 shapes overlapped. For the first time, they didn't look like broken pieces trying to fit. They looked like a family, standing at the fragile edge of a new beginning. 6 months later, summer had settled gently over the Vermont countryside, wrapping the hills in green and the evenings in soft gold. Behind a small cottage overlooking a patchwork of fields, the garden had been transformed into something that looked like it had been dreamed first and planted second. Strings of warm lights hung from the white wooden fence, swaying in the breeze like captured stars. Lavender lined the gravel path, its purple blooms nodding as guests walked past, the scent wrapping around them in soothing waves. Mason jars filled with wildflowers sat atop simple wooden tables, and the small crowd that had gathered spoke in low, happy tones. At the start of the path, Rosie stood very still in her favorite pink dress, a flower crown slightly crooked on her head, a woven basket looped over her arm. She took a deep breath, then began to walk, scattering lavender petals with solemn concentration. Her curls bounced with every step, but her face was serious, as if she understood the importance of what her feet were helping to begin. Just behind her, Noah walked carefully, both hands wrapped around a velvet box that seemed almost too big for him. His little suit jacket strained at the shoulders, his shoes slightly scuffed. He walked with a determined seriousness, the way only a child entrusted with something sacred can. At the end of the path, under a simple wooden arch wrapped with greenery and tiny white flowers, Ethan waited. His suit was a soft slate gray, his tie loose enough that he looked like himself and not like a stranger in a photograph. But it wasn't the suit that made people catch their breath. It was the way he watched the woman walking toward him. Claire stepped onto the path, her arm linked through her mother's. Her dress was plain and lovely, white cotton that moved easily with her, the hem brushing the tops of her sandals. No sequins, no train, nothing to prove anything to anyone. Her hair was braided down both sides, framing her face, a few wisps loose around her temples. There was a light in her eyes that had not been there the day of the hailstorm, a steadiness that comes from choosing to stay again and again. Her mother, who had once questioned Ethan, dabbed at her eyes with a crumpled tissue, torn between pride and something like awe. When Claire reached him, she slipped her hands into his. The world seemed to narrow to the small space between their faces, the hum of the guests fading to a soft blur. "I never used to believe in second chances," Ethan said, his voice just above a whisper meant for her alone. "But you were mine." She smiled, eyes glistening. "We're not the same two people who let each other slip away," she replied. "We're the ones who found our way back." The ceremony that followed was short and simple. No grand gestures, no elaborate speeches, just vows they had written in the quiet of late nights, by the glow of kitchen lights after the kids had fallen asleep. Promises not of perfection, but of showing up, of telling the truth even when it hurt, of choosing each other on the difficult days as deliberately as on the easy ones. When it was done, when someone called out, "Kiss her," and they did, Rosie squealed and Noah grinned so wide his cheeks hurt. The small crowd clapped and laughed, some wiping their eyes without shame. Later, when the sun dipped low and the sky turned that soft blue that happens just before night, Rosie tugged at Ethan's sleeve. "Daddy," she said, trying the word out in this new context and finding that it fit perfectly. "I have a wish." He knelt down, his heart feeling almost too full. "What is it, Bug?" She leaned close, her breath warm against his ear. "I wish we'll always be a family," she whispered, "and that nobody goes away again." He looked up at Claire, who stood a step away, watching them with tender eyes. She reached out and rested her hand on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around Rosie and nodded. "That wish already came true," he said, his voice thick. "And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure it stays true." As darkness settled gently over the garden, the last part of the evening began. Ethan stood between Claire and the children, each of them holding a paper lantern, its small flame flickering at the base. The lights from the fence shimmered in their eyes as they counted together. 1, 2, 3. They released the lanterns at the same time. 4 soft orbs of light rose slowly into the night sky, drifting side by side. From a distance, they looked like a little constellation pulling itself free, small and bright against the vastness above. Behind them, their shadows stretched across the grass. 2 adults, 2 children, shapes overlapping and touching, connected by something invisible and unbreakable. Love, yes, but also forgiveness, patience, the quiet work of staying when it would be easier to run. Somewhere in the stillness, a thought seemed to float on the cool air. Some people stop believing in love. Some people give up on family after too many broken promises, too many storms. But sometimes, love finds you anyway. In a hailstorm, in the scent of lavender pressed in an old book, in the voice of a child who doesn't know your name yet. Only your heart. And for those who lie awake at night, wondering if they've missed their chance, stories like this whisper a different truth. It's never too late for a beginning. If this story kept you company tonight, if it made your chest ache a little, or your eyes sting, or your heart feel a touch less lonely, remember that you're not alone in the dark. There are other nights, other stories, other quiet journeys waiting. When you're ready, you can come back, and we'll walk through another one together, slowly, gently, until sleep finally finds you.